Let's dive into the mysteries behind the Appalachian Mountains. So let's start things off with Dennis Martin. You have probably heard of this boy's name in the past, or maybe recently if you have been looking into the Appalachian Mountains, or possibly the 411 cases, or like the missing cases reports. But specifically Dennis Martin, he was a 6-year-old boy that disappeared on June 14th, 1969 in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park when he was out with his family. On the day of his disappearance, he was wearing a red t-shirt and some green trousers. And from the case file, it does state that Dennis and 3 other boys decided to sneak up and try and surprise the adults as they were out in like a family outing. It is said in the case report that Martin's father became concerned and repeatedly started calling out for him after not seeing his son after about 3 to 5 minutes. Roughly around 8:30 p.m., Martin's grandfather ended up notifying the rangers in Cades Cove that he went missing. Little Dennis Martin had gone missing and did not know where he went. Unfortunately, due to the heavy rain and thunderstorms that had been going on, they could not deploy that much resources in that time. Just because of all the weather and things like that, they had to kind of wait it out till the next morning and hope that things kind of died down, which is kind of tragic because it's a little boy. And if they were concerned about the weather, can you imagine little Dennis, 6-year-old Dennis? Like, what is he gonna do out there all by himself? I will say they ended up kind of like just looking around in the immediate area where he had disappeared, just kind of in like the immediate area, looking around. Maybe he went here, there, just kind of seeing if that was a possibility. But when that did not happen, they did not find him, then they ended up deciding that, you know what, let's just continue the search tomorrow and we'll continue to investigate when the weather clears up just a little bit so we can have more people here and more resources. It was an actual estimation that roughly 2,000 searchers were actually out on the ground trying to look for Dennis, because they were also concerned, you know, when a little boy goes missing, you raise your hand up to go see, like, can I help? Can I go have some eyes out there? Try and see if I can find him. Maybe like the expert hikers, campers that kind of know the area a little bit better, maybe they can kind of have clues of where he went or where he disappeared to. Interestingly enough, there was actually a psychic that reached out towards the end of their investigation when they couldn't really find him. They didn't have any clues. He just kind of disappeared out of nowhere. They had a psychic kind of give her thoughts on the matter, and she basically told them, stop looking on the ground and start looking in the trees and the treetops. Those were her thoughts. She kind of told them, you're not looking in the right direction. You're not looking in the right spots. That's why you're not finding Dennis. I will say that it seems that this was one of the theories that was kind of like pushed to the side. They tried to do what she said. They did not find anything either. He is still missing to this day. So the psychic that had reached out to them, I mean, I guess her psychic abilities were failing her at that day, because did not seem to be the case. There are quite a few theories of what could have happened to Dennis Lloyd Martin, but it's sadly enough still a mystery. Like, no one really knows what happened. There's just a lot of theories. So some of the theories that I kind of looked into or kind of saw were that possibly he was abducted. So there was actually record, so in the case file, the actual case file of Dennis Lloyd Martin's disappearance, it actually talked about how there was a long distance phone call that was made to Chief Wells, where it basically said a woman had stated she saw Dennis in a white car with Tennessee license plates. She was almost positive it was him since she had seen his picture everywhere. Like, everyone in town or even neighboring towns had seen his photo. They kind of had known he was missing. However, like, after that information and her giving him the call, there was no concrete evidence to confirm any of these theories. It's just phone call was made. She allegedly thinks that she had seen him, but that was kind of where it kind of dropped off, I guess. No really concrete evidence that maybe he was abducted, but that is kind of like one of the bigger theories, I guess you can say, that he possibly was abducted, because it's just very odd. He kind of just disappeared out of nowhere, and it's in the middle of the woods. And then it was, I believe, said that he was autistic as well, something like that. But there are many different like theories essentially. Another missing persons case that actually happened in the area was actually Carl Herrick. So on November 1943, Carl and his cousin Henry went out hunting in the woods, something that they normally did, so it wasn't anything new to them. They were northeast of the woods in Glastonbury. They ended up getting separated during the hunt, so they were both, you know, doing their own thing. They kind of got lost, and then I believe his cousin Henry actually made it back and then realized, okay, I haven't seen Carl, where is he? So he did have to reach out and kind of have someone try and find him or try and help him find him. But unfortunately, Henry was the only one able to return to their campsite, whereas Carl unfortunately did not. I'm assuming that maybe that's what they had agreed upon. We're gonna do our own thing, or we're gonna meet up back at the campsite. But unfortunately, Henry was the only one that made it back to the campsite, and Carl did not. Once it started to get dark, his cousin Henry started to get worried. I'm assuming they had done this quite a few times already, and they kind of knew what time they would get back. So it was kind of concerning that it was getting late and he hadn't heard nothing, and he hadn't come back yet either. There was like no sign of that. But what had happened was basically they had looked out for him, they could not find him, and after 3 days of nonstop searching, they did end up finding Carl's body. They found him with his rifle up against a tree just a few feet away. Remember, he does hunt things like that, so it was very odd that his rifle was just set right next, just a few feet away from him on a tree. And the craziest thing was actually the autopsy report. Get this, the autopsy report revealed that he was squeezed to death, his lung punctured by his own ribs. It was very, very odd. Like, what could have done that? If you're not very familiar, like when you go camping, things like that, of course there are like bears, mountain lions, things like that. But from a lot of the attacks and like a lot of other reports that have happened of like bear attacks, they don't necessarily try and squeeze you to death. So it was very odd, very out of the ordinary. So that's what they kind of concluded, that possibly it was just a bear that squeezed him to death. So there were bear tracks actually around the area, but it begged the question, who squeezed Carl to death, and why was his rifle fully loaded next to him? It was very odd. Another case of like a missing persons case was actually Paula Welden. 18-year-old college student Paula Welden at Bennington College had gone for a hike and never returned. She came from a wealthy family, and from my research was a very friendly girl, kind of well known around her college, and an accomplished student. I believe at the time they were actually studying for midterms. They had a lot of exams during that time that she kind of disappeared, from what it looked like. Right after all those exams, right, if I'm remembering right from my college days, after all those exams you normally have like some type of holiday, some type of break to kind of just ease the tension, just kind of relax, get back onto vacation mode. So it was said that she decided to go on a hike, which was not something crazy for her. Like, her roommate and other friends had kind of known that she would go on hikes here and there. Like, it's not out of the ordinary for someone that's maybe stressed out, kind of wants to get like a breath of fresh air, go outside, touch some grass, something like that. But she grabbed her things, told her roommate Elizabeth she was going on a hike and she would just be back later. So it was nothing concerning, nothing out of the ordinary. It wasn't like Paula had never gone on a hike. No, she would do this regularly. It was said in the multiple articles I guess I was reading that she was wearing a red parka, blue jeans, and a pair of sneakers. Keep in mind it was winter season in Vermont, so I don't think that was anything too crazy. Maybe she could have bundled up a little bit more, but I'm from California, so like, to me, anything below 70, I'm cold. But maybe like that's what she's like used to camping in or like hiking in, right? Maybe that's normal attire for her. The very next day, her roommate did end up being concerned because it was the next day and Paula had not returned yet. So it was like, okay, what is going on? Where is she? She was supposed to go for a quick hike and come back, but there is no missed calls, there is nothing. She just kind of vanished. Like, where is she? So she did like tell people, and then they ended up like trying to find her and like did an investigation. They did contact her family and immediately they went looking for her, but tragically she was just never seen again. Like, when she said goodbye to her roommate, she was going on a hike, she just did not make it back. And I think there were reports that her father believed possibly that she had just maybe run off with a boyfriend or something like that, but from what it seems like, the roommates and the friends did not necessarily believe that story. They didn't really think that was what really happened. There were accounts of her hitchhiking and actually getting a ride from someone called Lewis Knapp. I hope I said that right. So basically, he did not take her all the way to the beginning of the trail. He kind of stopped her, or he kind of dropped her off midway, I guess you can say. So point A, B, and C being like where the trail begins, and point A is where he was. He kind of just dropped her off at point B, kind of towards the middle. She still had to walk, I believe, a mile or two to get there to the actual trail. But there were reports of people on the trail seeing that she was dropped off and they had seen her there. So it wasn't like he picked her up and then she was abducted, things like that. Like, no, they definitely like looked into this and they cleared him and they said no, that was not the case. Who knows, maybe he looped around and then tried to abduct her after he had dropped her off, just to kind of have that witness report of like, okay, people saw me drop her off, things like that. But they did investigate into this and they kind of cleared that, said no, it wasn't him, Lewis is fine. What could it have been? How did Paula Welden just vanish? So the last story, at least for the missing persons cases, would be Paul Jepson. And the story goes, on 1950, an 8-year-old Jepson had gone to the town dump with his mom. And I believe it was like a Thursday afternoon. They were just there to run some errands and also feed the pigs in the area. Not 100% sure why, but that's what was in the articles and stuff like that. I guess I had to feed the town or the dump pigs, I guess. Maybe that was something common back in the day. I do not know. She had allegedly left Paul in the truck while she fed the pigs in the area and tended to the garbage. I don't know why she left them there, regardless if it was 30 minutes, an hour, 5 minutes, regardless. I don't know why she just left him in the car. Like, even if he was entertained, it just did not. It's just like an outsider looking at it. I don't know why she would just leave him in the car. Maybe this was like a regular thing. Maybe she would do this every time they went there and like had to do the errands. She had been gone for an hour quite some time, and then she lost track of time and then ran back to like see if her little Paul Jepson was there, and he just vanished. He was just gone without a trace. But they immediately had search parties, bloodhounds, like all these different things. But it was just very odd, I guess you can say, that the bloodhounds had tracked his scent to the back road by the infamous Long Trail. Just ironically where Paula had also gone missing. Very weird. It kind of just like, the scent just cut off out of nowhere. That's why like possibly he was abducted. I think that was one of the theories, where maybe someone just took him. That's why his scent just disappeared, because they put him in a like moving vehicle and then boom, he just vanished. And there, when it comes to like the Appalachian Mountains and like the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, was things like the Bennington Triangle, where I think there were a few reports of people just vanishing, and it was like in an immediate area. Moon-eyed people, aliens, Bigfoot, Mothman, some cryptic folklore tales as well. And then like one of the bigger ones would probably be the cave systems. All those mysterious cases where people just vanished, it kind of aligns with like the cave systems in the US. A little odd. And then the Bennington Triangle, like I had mentioned earlier, about 1945 to 1950, Joseph Citro, I believe was his name, had coined the term Bennington Triangle, because during this time frame people were just vanishing into thin air. So it was quite odd that within this time frame like people vanished, but it was only a few. I believe it was like 5 people had vanished, something like that. So not like an insane amount, but regardless, they did coin the term Bennington Triangle, kind of like Bermuda Triangle, where people just disappear and like are never found again, you know. Just some final thoughts that has to do with like everything going on with the Appalachian Mountains, the Appalachian Trail, Dennis, Paula, Carl, like all these disappearances, the Bennington Triangle, Mothman, moon-eyed people, like all these different things. Like it's very interesting. Like when I was researching, I was trying to get also like maybe like actual first person reports of like maybe what they had seen, things like that. Some people were saying that they live in the area, they have lived there like by the Appalachian Mountains, and they always like had an eerie feeling, always felt like something was odd, maybe something watching them, something would always happen, things like that. And then I would also see reports on like on the other side where people would say they have lived there their whole life and they have not really experienced anything. They have yet to experience something odd or weird. They're just, you know, mountains, that's it. It's just a national park, nothing crazy about it. Weird that people are disappearing, but nothing too crazy about it or like mysterious about it. But I guess it just really depends on who or what side you're believing. Are there truly mysterious things going on that can't be explained, or are there logical explanations to all of these things? What are your thoughts?